Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. And today's video, it's going to be a brand new political discussion based video or political news actually. And I just want to say, are you registered to vote in this upcoming election? Are you registered to vote? Well, you should be, because this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And that's what President Joe Biden just said earlier today. Democracy is on the ballot. It is 100% on the ballot. And what I mean by this is ranked choice voting is on the ballot. It's on the ballot in numerous jurisdictions for some statewide measures, and also there's some ballot measures that would implement ranked choice voting for several city and local elections. And this is important. This is crucial. And this is why it's so important for you to be registered to vote this upcoming election cycle. Mainly because ranked choice voting is 100% on the ballot. And it's why it's so important for you to turn out to vote. Turn out, have all of your friends, neighbors who are also citizens and registered to vote. Get them to turn out this election, because this is important if we want to strengthen American democracy for generations to come. So, but before I begin in talking about the RCV ballot measures that will be on the ballot in 2022 in several of the jurisdictions, as what Fair Vote Action on this site talks about, I don't think most of you know is that on Twitter. And this is a pretty good idea that I've always wanted to do. I will be starting a brand new series on my channel called the Ranked Choice Voting Series. In this series, we'll be taking previous elections, being generals or party primaries, in which a candidate only got a plurality of the vote. So, in the first part of the series, I want to do an alternative 2016 Republican presidential primary, seeing how the presidential primary would be like if there was a ranked choice voting system to nominate their nominees for president, and how it could be, and how the results could definitely be different. We could have definitely had a different election result, mainly because as you guys may have remembered, in the 2016 Republican presidential primary, it was a very zero-sum contest. Trump was immensely polarizing. There was other Republican candidates in the race, pretty good, I would say. Even though I have to admit this, I was a Trump supporter in 2016 because I thought he would be a good candidate, but to be honest now, I don't think he's a good Republican candidate. I don't think he's a good candidate anymore. I don't really like him as a person. I think he's too polarizing, too extreme. I just think he's a sore loser after the 2020 election. But I was a Trump supporter during the 2016 election. That was when I was a very conservative Republican. And as we all remember, it was a zero-sum contest. It might have been hilarious. There might have been jokes during this Republican presidential primary. There was, but because of that resulted in a general election where 62% of voters back during the 2016 presidential election didn't really like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. And that's why we saw huge third-party support from Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, and so on. It's because people they didn't really like the major parties' candidates. So that's exactly why I've decided to do a ranked choice voting series, starting with the first season of having an alternative 2016 Republican presidential primary. Mainly because I want to see how ranked choice voting could have impacted the result of the 2016 Republican presidential primary. Mainly because Trump did not, like it or not, in most of the states' primaries early on, Trump did not get 50% plus one of the votes. He did not get 50% plus one in New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. Ted Cruz did not get 50% plus one of the vote in the Iowa caucus even. This ultimately led to a result where Trump only won the Republican nomination with just 45% of the vote. That means only 54% of Republican voters wanted someone else to be their nominee, not Donald Trump. And so that's exactly why I wanted to do this series. It always fascinated me to see how ranked choice voting could have changed certain elections where a candidate only got a plurality of the vote. So, and that's why I'm starting this ranked choice voting series. And as I explained earlier, in the first season, we are doing a 2016 Iowa Republican presidential primary. This is my own version of election night videos, as you saw a lot of YouTube channels. But it's going to be a ranked choice voting series where you get to rank your candidates in order of preference, and we get to really see how. And I will be posting short videos of the election results that you participated in this poll, that would really see how ranked choice voting could have led to a different result if the Republicans used this type of voting method in the 2016 Republican presidential primary. We will first start with Iowa, then we're going to start with New Hampshire, and then we're going to start with Nevada, South Carolina, and then we'll move into the states on Super Tuesday, that like Texas, most notably, and even Arizona, Alabama, Mississippi, that would impact, that in which a lot of those delegates would ultimately shape who wins the Republican nomination, and that would be through a ranked choice voting result. So I urge everyone, I myself, to vote in this poll. Please only vote one time and get as many as your friends and family members and people you know online as much as possible to participate in this election result. So the sampling size would be a lot larger, so we can get more of a larger audience turning out in this election poll, so we can have a bit more of an accurate pollster, so we have a larger sample size. But all you have to do is you have 18 candidates to choose from: Donald Trump, Lindsey Graham, George Pataki, Chris Christie, Jim Gilmore, Rick Santorum, Marco Rubio, John Kasich, Ted Cruz, etc., etc. So all you have to do is just rank your candidates in order of preference. You have to do it like this. And you can rank as many candidates as you want. You can rank all 18 candidates, or you can just rank several candidates, or rank one candidate. But I recommend you to rank all the candidates in order of your preference, just so we can get a better ranked choice voting result overall. So once again, I will leave this. This election ballot will be in the description of the video below and the comment section, so you guys can participate. And I urge you to participate in this election poll to really see how ranked choice voting could have impacted the 2016 Republican presidential primary if the Republicans did use this type of voting method. Because I'm 100% interested in seeing how this could impact the election results overall. But back to the main topics of this video and how you should be registered to vote this upcoming election, mainly because this is the most important election of our lifetime, because democracy, ranked choice voting, is on the ballot this election cycle. Mainly because Nevada, if you live in the state of Nevada, you will be able to vote on a state constitutional amendment to establish a Final Five voting system. Final Five voting, let me explain how Final Five voting works. It's similar to the state of Alaska's new blanket nonpartisan open primary, where the top 4 vote getters, regardless of party, advance to the general election. But with Final Five voting, instead of the top 4 vote getters, it's the top 5 vote getters will advance to the general election, where RCV would choose among the top 5 finalists. And that's what Nevada has in place. Portland, Oregon, as I talked about in an earlier video, Portland, Oregon will also be implementing a different type of ranked choice voting system, also known as proportional ranked choice voting, or single transferable vote, to elect their city council in 4 city council districts that would choose among 3 council members via a proportional representation. Check out this video here to learn more about single transferable vote. There's other cities, Seattle, Washington, Evanston, Illinois is voting on a measure to adopt ranked choice voting for their local elections, same as Fort Collins. Ohio, California, Clark County, San Juan, Washington, and even Portland, Maine, that's also voting for a single transferable vote to elect their city councils in their upcoming election. Honestly, ranked choice voting is becoming it's rapidly growing, and it's becoming more and more frequent in more and more states and jurisdictions, mainly because people are so dissatisfied with the way politics has been going. People are just dissatisfied with the major parties, and they just want change, and that's why we're seeing Fair Vote, the California Ranked Choice Voting Coalition that I'm a part of. I'm glad to be a social media supporter of. That's working towards advancing ranked choice voting. We're helping to educate people on the new voting method and to really help them understand that we can make changes to our democracy, and we can fix the engine to electing our leaders, in which they're much more incentivized to work with other parties and to find common ground solutions to our country's major problems. I know you guys don't want to see our parties to fight all the time, but that's in their self-interest due to our current old archaic first past the post voting system, because they're much more incentivized to ignore the will of most voters and not compromise and still win with just a plurality of the vote, such as just winning with only 20, 30, or 40% of the popular vote. It's our winner-take-all elections, and it's why we need to move away from winner-take-all and adopt ranked choice voting and proportional representation. And that's why 2022 is the most important election of our lifetimes to reimagine a brighter democracy. But that doesn't mean we're gonna have pushback, mainly because Republicans are raging against ranked choice voting after Alaska's special election that ultimately elected the first native to Alaska in Alaska's at-large congressional district special election, mainly because several Republicans, such as Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, took to Twitter and said ranked choice voting is a scam to rig elections. Because his argument is that 60% of Alaska voters voted for a Republican, but thanks to our convoluted process and ballot exhaustion, they disenfranchised 60% of voters in Alaska that favor the Republican Party, which ultimately led to a Democrat winning. Well, I find this kind of misleading, because 60% of Alaskan voters did not vote for a Republican. They voted for candidates. They didn't vote for parties. They voted for candidates. In the first round, what he really means by this is Sarah Palin in the first round, Mary Peltola got the most votes with 39.7% of the vote. Sarah Palin got 30.9%. Nick Begich got 27.8%. The write-in candidates, people who wrote in a candidate, got 1.6%. So the people who wrote in a candidate voted for Nick Begich and Sarah Palin as their first choice. That made up 60% of voters. So this means in the first round, 60% of voters backed other candidates. But under a ranked choice voting system, you cannot get just 39.7% or 40% of the vote to be elected. You need 50% plus one of the total votes to win. So there was vote eliminations. The write-in candidates first got eliminated, and those voters who wrote in a candidate had their second choices allocated based on their number 2 choice and their number 3 choice. Then once the write-in candidates' votes were reallocated based on their supporters' number 2 choices, Nick Begich was eliminated, and his votes were reallocated, where most of it went to Sarah Palin, but some of it crossed over to support the Democrat candidate, which ultimately allowed Mary Peltola to be elected as the next congressman to fill out the remainder of Don Young's term, in which she finished in the final round with 51.5% of the vote, and Sarah Palin got 48.5% of the vote. This meant that 60% of voters that voted in the first round for their first choice candidates are ultimately satisfied with the winner, mainly because Mary Peltola got majority support. She has earned a governing mandate to represent the state of Alaska. Plain and simple. Mary Peltola was able to build a coalition with Democrats, with Libertarians, with Independents, and also with Republican voters. On top of that, this is one of the biggest weaknesses for polarizing candidates like Palin and even like Donald Trump, who engaged in negative campaigning. So whenever you engage in negative campaigning, what that Nick Begich and Sarah Palin did, they both hate each other's guts and they spend negative attack ads on each other. Well, they pretty much alienated both of each other's supporters, in which some of Nick Begich's supporters decided to rank Peltola as their number 2 choice, which ultimately hurt Palin because she didn't get enough of Begich's supporters' second choices to get over 50%. That ultimately allowed the Democrat to flip Alaska's at-large district. That's huge. That's plain and simple. Republicans just crossed over, and honestly. And number 2, it's not a confusing system as what Senator Tom Cotton is saying. Mainly because 85% of Alaskans found that instant runoff voting was a simple voting method. 95% of them received instructions on how to rank their choices. 66% of them ranked multiple candidates. Only 33% of voters who only voted for one candidate. On top of that, 62% of Alaskans support the state's new primary system. So in this regard, it preserves the 60% of voters that voted for other candidates in the first round. It preserved the idea of majority rule and democracy and one person, one vote. Because people were more inclined to vote for their favorite candidate and then rank backup choices as their second choice. And they loved this system. Alaska loved it. And it was an ultimate success because it strengthened Native people in Alaska. It strengthened minorities in Alaska because it shows that ranked choice voting strengthens minority representation. And this is ultimately a great thing. And that's what this is a founding principle of what our framers envisioned for our Constitution. They built a democratic republic, where a republic and a democracy, where we have majority rule, but we also have the rights of the minority, where we also protect minority rights. Ranked choice voting strengthens minority representation, and it gives every single American and even Alaskan a voice, and it showed in this special election. And also, another Republican from Utah elected official also disagreed with Tom Cotton's claim. And I'll let this video play out right now.
Seems to make a lot of sense in Alaska and Nevada and beyond. Joining me now is Utah State Representative Mike Winder. He's behind a push in Utah to expand ranked choice. He is a Republican. Representative, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So what do
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here.
It seems a number of Republicans are speaking out against this system because of what happened to Palin. What would you say to them?
Well, I like Tom Cotton, but he's wrong on this one. Ranked choice voting is a great way to better express the will of the voters. You mentioned Nevada. Montana's another example. John Tester's the senator there, and he always squeaks out a victory with less than 50% because there's a libertarian spoiler every time. If you had ranked choice voting in Montana, they'd have a Republican senator. So I know they may not like the outcome if you're a Palin fan, but really it expresses the will of the voters better.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because I hate the fact that it's all of this sort of Republican versus Democrat, right? I mean, I would think that one of the reasons that you're behind this is because it allows the voters to better say who they want to elect them, who they want to elect.
Right. In Utah last year in our municipal races, We had 26 cities across the state do it. It was great. In our Republican convention, we did it, and it worked out great. And so it does better express the will of the voters. If I'm Sarah Palin right now, you don't call on Begich to drop out, although that's her right to do so. You say, hey, Begich voters, if I'm not your first choice, please put me down as your second. And if you're Begich, you say, if I'm not your first choice, please put Sarah Palin down your second, and let's make sure we have a Republican from the great state of Alaska.
But I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, if they're smart, they would. And we saw that in the gubernatorial convention here in Utah.
Yeah.
Where we saw John Huntsman, Spencer Cox, Amy Winder Newton, Greg Hughes, and they actually did that. They said to the convention delegates, hey, if I'm not your first choice, please put me down as your second or your third. And it made a difference. And it actually made it more civil, and it ensured we ended up with a strong Republican gubernatorial nominee in Utah.
Do you think that this minimizes extremism in the results?
I think it does. Think how different the New Hampshire primary of 2016 would have been if you had ranked choice voting. Well, in that one, 70+% wanted someone besides Donald Trump and may have coalesced behind a different candidate. Instead, Donald Trump caught a very, very small plurality, and that rolled on to be the nomination. You look at 1992, where Ross Perot was a spoiler to George Herbert Walker Bush, and we got the Clintons for 8 years. That election could have been different. So ranked choice voting does work to express the will of the common sense mainstream voters.
All right.
He completely disagreed with Tom Cotton, mainly because ranked choice voting is one of those ways to allow voters to fully express themselves at the ballot box. And it shows even in Utah. In several of the cities in Utah, 86% of respondents in Utah and several of the cities in Utah found ranked choice voting to be an easy voting system to use. 82% of them want ranked choice voting used in future elections. 71% of Payson's voters ranked all 5 candidates on the ballot. 58.6% of Vineyard voters ranked all 7 candidates on the ballot. 87.5% of candidates had a positive impression of ranked choice voting. 75% of candidates think their city should continue using ranked choice voting with no candidates opposing it. This has bipartisan support amongst Republicans and Democrats, mainly because they like it, because it strengthens the idea of majority rule, and it also strengthens party unity within a primary. So, because it solves crowded primaries in which the candidate that ultimately wins has broad support among their party members, in which their party is well unified around a nominee to take on another party's nominee within the general election. Ranked choice voting is one of those voting systems that will strengthen our democracy and will allow voters more choice and more voice in which it's safe for them to vote their conscience. It has broad bipartisan support amongst Republicans, and because of that, ranked choice voting, thanks to Tom, and I know Tom Cotton may realize this or not. Ranked choice voting also helped the Virginia Republican Party flip 3 statewide offices in a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points. They flipped the Virginia governor's race, they flipped the lieutenant governorship, and they flipped the attorney general's race, mainly because they used ranked choice voting to nominate their candidates in order of preference. This is absolutely monumental. And based on the experiences by the Virginia Republican Party, they were able to advance a broadly supported nominee, and that was Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Sears, and Jason Myrays. And also, ranked choice voting, Republicans should also support ranked choice voting, mainly because we all may know the ideal that and the claim the Republicans claim to be a fiscally conservative party, that we care about spending money smartly. Well, guess what? Ranked choice voting, it saves taxpayer money because there's no longer a need to pay for another runoff election, because runoff elections are very costly. They have to spend more money, and it always has low turnout in the runoff. And because of that, ranked choice voting solves this problem, man, because voters only have to vote one time and you only have to pay for one election. It saves money, saves taxpayer money, and saves voters time because they only have to vote one time. This is ultimately a fiscally conservative ideal. Republicans should be champions of ranked choice voting. It preserves it plays into the ideal of saving money, saving time. That's the belief of being a fiscal conservative. Spending money when you have money. When you have money to support a policy, then we should spend money to support that policy. And ranked choice voting is one of those systems that will save taxpayer money. And I encourage Republicans to support implementing ranked choice voting. And that's why last year in 2021, last summer of 2021, when Georgia passed their new voting law that implemented that pretty much reduced runoff times and allowed military and overseas voters to use a ranked choice voting ballot, because once again, what a lot of Republicans support said is, and also it was signed into law by Governor Brian Kemp, is that traditional runoff elections are very costly. They're costly, and it's always low turnout. And that's exactly why a Republican state senator allowed military and overseas voters to rank their candidates in order of preference. And on top of that, that's the same Republican state senator from the Peach State is also drafting another bill that would expand ranked choice voting to all residents in Georgia, because he knows of the benefits. It gets rid of costly runoffs and low turnout runoff elections, and it leads to one singular high turnout election that saves taxpayer money. So once again, I encourage Tom Cotton to support ranked choice voting, to be a champion of it, because it saves taxpayer money. It allowed you to unite. It allowed your party to unite around a broadly supported candidate that was able to flip 3 statewide offices in a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points in 2020 against Donald Trump. It benefits your party. And also, on top of that, it ends vote splitting. You no longer have to worry about Libertarians or Constitution Party candidates or Reform Party candidates of splitting the vote. You just have to appeal and be more civil to those opponents so their supporters can rank you second. It ends vote splitting, and that's what I know your party gets all mad when third parties split your votes. Ranked choice voting is a way to end vote splitting, in which third parties are no longer spoilers. And that's why ranked choice voting, and that's why you should support ranked choice voting. And that's why it's being expanded upon everywhere across this nation. The Virginia Republican Party, once again, they used ranked choice voting to nominate their candidate to take on Jennifer Wexton of Virginia's 10th Congressional District. They nominated Hung Cao, where he ultimately, in the final round, which was round 9, he got 52% of the vote. So that means he has a unified party behind him. It really preserves the benefit. RCV is a benefit to nominating conventions, to nominating your candidates, because party voters and delegates would be able to express themselves through the ballot box, and then they can also ultimately shape whoever wins their nominee, so a wider base of Republican voters are more unified around a nominee. And that means a majority of Republican voters will turn out for their nominee. And that could have had positive impacts if ranked choice voting was also used in the Pennsylvania Republican Party's primary, and also the Arizona Republican Party's primary for Senate and governor in both Pennsylvania and Arizona. It could have had benefits it could have benefited the Republicans, because they would have been able to nominate a stronger candidate. So in this regard, ranked choice voting It benefits Republicans and it benefits Democrats. It benefits independents, libertarians, and other parties. It benefits all parties. It benefits every single soul, because now everyone can express themselves and they can also truly vote what they want. They can truly vote what type of government they want and who they want to get elected. That's the purpose of a democratic republic. And it's why 42% of Nevadans support the Constitutional Amendment that would implement ranked choice voting for the general election. That would remove closed party primaries, in which it would move towards a final five voting system, or a top five nonpartisan open primary system. Because independent voters, nonpartisans, they've been growing recently, and which means they were unable to vote in Nevada's closed primary. So those 42% those nonpartisans believe it's time to move away from closed primaries, and to strengthen and to reform our democratic systems, in which our leaders are more inclined to work across the aisle and to achieve policies that improve upon the lives of all Americans. And that's why ranked choice voting is an excellent way to improve upon our democratic elections. And it's no coincidence why ranked choice voting is gaining momentum all across this nation, because people are sick and tired of the two-party system. They're sick and tired of Congress of our institutions being so dysfunctional, where our leaders are more concerned on winning elections rather than implementing policies that improve upon all of our lives. It's why 66.3% of Americans disapprove of the direction Congress is going. But why don't we not have change after an election? Mainly because 92%, 90% and 80% of incumbent 90 to 80% of members of Congress are already set up to win re-election due to single-member plurality districts, closed party primaries, and also partisan gerrymandering plays a role into that. And that's why Fair Vote, the California Ranked Choice Voting Coalition, More Choice San Diego, and Better Ballot Georgia, and so on, are taking steps, and why citizens are taking steps to reforming our democratic elections, to elect leaders that don't care about winning elections, but more care 100% about solving problems. And that's why, ranked choice voting, why I encourage everyone to vote yes for ranked choice voting this November. Vote yes for ranked choice voting, Nevada. Vote yes for proportional representation, Portland, Oregon. Vote yes for proportional representation, Maine. Vote yes for ranked choice voting for all city governments across this country, across all jurisdictions. Stand for a brighter democracy. That's why Hawaii became the ninth state in the union to implement ranked choice voting for special federal elections. Because people want change. They're tired of the infighting, and they just want change. They just want a government that listens to their needs and implements policies that can better affiliate with them. And that's exactly why we're seeing this historic movement to reimagine a better democracy. So, once again, I encourage everyone to fight and strengthen American democracy for the better. Fight for a better democracy. Fight for a more choice and more voice democracy. Fight for a civil democracy. Fight for a friendly democracy. Fight for a democracy where all candidates have dignity, where everyone's participating in a substantive debate on issues and policies, where we're not attacking each other. We're all working together as Americans to strive to a more perfect union. And that's the type of democracy that President Joe Biden wants to live in, that many that many Republicans who want to live in. That's what Democrats want to live in. That's what independents, libertarians, Greens, and other parties want to live in. A country where we're all working together. And that's exactly why it's so important for you to be registered to vote in this election cycle, because our democracy is on the ballot. Ranked choice voting and a healthier democracy and a more choice and more voice democracy and a civil democracy and a substantive republic is on the ballot. So once again, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and make sure you comment down below and share your opinions. And will you be voting this election cycle and participating in this election to fight to strengthen our democracy? And once again, don't forget to participate in this poll, 2016 Iowa Republican presidential primary, which is an alternative election of what would happen if ranked choice voting was used in the 2016 Republican presidential primary. But don't forget to participate in the poll. Get many of your friends, family members, and also people you know online to participate in this poll to really help us normalize ranked choice voting, and so we can at one day have it in all states and in place for all elections for generations. So once again, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, guys, this is the Young Centrist, and I am out.